Hi, good morning, Madam Member. My name is Sukriti Gupta, and my friend here is Miss Agueda Morsy. We are both co-counsel on record. Please allow us to examine our appellant, Mr. Philip Torres, to establish the factors for humanitarian and compassionate considerations exist, and we hope his appeal is allowed. I would like to add straight away that we are not challenging the legal validity of the decision by the VO. Good morning, Mr. Torres. How are you?
I'm very well considering the circumstances. Thank you very much.
Good. I and my friend here are going to ask you some questions. So we hope that we can come out with a favorable decision.
Thank
Could
you.
you tell me, could you tell me why we are here today?
Okay, so I'm here because I appealed my decision that the visa officer refused to allow me to come back to Canada and resume my permanent residency. The officer looked at my application and they decided that because I haven't lived for the period of time that I should have in the past 5 years, that they felt that I'm no longer a permanent resident. And because I didn't fulfill the obligation, I'm appealing the decision.
Okay. And when and how did you become a permanent resident, Mr. Torres?
I came to Canada in sometime in October. I think I became landed in 22nd of October 2013. And I came as a skilled worker under the federal skilled worker program. I applied. There was a demand for my services. I'm a cybersecurity officer. And, I've worked in IT all my life. That's how I became a permanent resident.
Okay. And when did you leave Canada?
Within a couple of years of coming to Canada, I think I left sometime in March, maybe 17th of March, 2015.
Okay. And why did you have to leave Canada?
Actually, I didn't want to leave Canada, but I had no choice. Um my grandmother, who brought us up, I say up meaning my sisters and I, she was our caregiver when we were young and in our young adulthood. Unfortunately, she became very, very ill. And there was no one in Brazil to look after her. Um, my daughter, Marcella, was only 7 at that time. And in fact, my grandmother was the one who was looking after Marcella. So we as a family, including my sisters, we all decided that I was the one who was able to go and look after my grandmother and take care of her. My Marcella's mother, my wife, unfortunately passed away prior to me coming to Canada. So that was in 2012. So there was no one else to look after my grandmother.
Okay. I'm so sorry to hear that. Could you tell me when and why did you decide to come back to Canada?
Well, I made my decision to come back to Canada when I left Canada in 2015. This was just a temporary thing. I never thought that I'd continue to live in Brazil because I made a conscious decision and applied as a skilled worker. So I thought that if my grandmother gets better, then I'd come back to Canada, or if my grandmother passes away, then I'd come back to Canada. She passed away in 2018 in February. And that is when I wanted to return to Canada straight away because I was only here for the reason of looking after my grandmother. When she passed away, I had no other reason to be here. So I decided to come back to Canada in 2018 in the middle of February when my grandmother passed away.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Torres. Now, my friend here, Miss Agueda, is going to ask you more questions. Thank you. Over to you, Miss Agueda.
Thank you, Councilor Gupta. I'll be asking you, Mr. Torres, the remainder of the questions. Mr. Torres, did you return to Canada shortly after your grandmother died?
Actually, as much as I wanted to, I just couldn't afford to return to Canada. So I didn't. And the reason I didn't was I just didn't have sufficient funds. You know, you need some money to go back and resume your life. And I used up all my savings while I was here in Brazil, paying for the fees, doctor's fees, and things for my grandmother. And because my ex-girlfriend, who I had a property with in Toronto, was not able to pay the amount of money that I needed to come back, I had to wait. So I was stuck here in Brazil.
And when did you finally could return to Canada, and why?
So I was able to return to Canada as soon as I got the money. We sold the condo, the one that I shared with my girlfriend, and that happened in the end of May 2019. We had a little bit of money that we made on that. We split that money, and I'm now in a position financially to return to Canada, look after myself and look after my daughter for at least 6 or 8 months before I'm able to find a job.
And Mr. Torres, what did you leave behind in Canada the first time you left?
Actually, I left everything. I didn't take anything with me apart from a small suitcase with some clothes in it. Everything was in Canada. My worldly possessions, things that are very important to me, especially in my business. The laptop, you know, that is my life because that's how I earned my living. I maintained my medical services plan. I think it's called OHIP. I continue to make payments on that. I maintain my bank accounts. Initially, there was some money that was coming in from my previous job, but that stopped. And the property, I had a property at the time that I left, but that also we sold to get sufficient money for Marcel and I to come back to Canada. I have a very wide circle of good friends and support, and they're like my family to me. So I left all these things when I came to Brazil.
Thank you. And could you please tell us why did your daughter didn't come to Canada to live with you?
Yeah, so that's a really kind of a strange kind of a situation. What happened was when I came to Canada, I applied to have my daughter come and join me in Canada. And the application processed, everything was going very well. But unfortunately, my wife passed away in a car accident at that time. That was, a very tragic thing. And fairly soon after that, after I came, then I had to come back to Brazil to look after my grandmother. Marcela's permanent residency visa was all done. Had it not been for the fact that my grandmother was unwell and I had to rush back to Brazil to look after her, Marcela would have become a landed permanent resident of Canada and would have been living with me. So that's the only reason I didn't go back. And somebody told me that me being the sponsor, I can't remember who, but because I wasn't in Canada, my daughter Marcela couldn't be sent by herself. And also my girlfriend at that time, Rosemary, didn't want to take the responsibility of looking after my daughter. So a number of factors, and because she couldn't come into Canada, I think they gave her 4 or 6 months to travel into Canada, and because of that, her permanent resident visa also expired.
And Mr. Torres, could you please tell us what effects all these events had on your daughter?
Yeah, I feel very responsible for the circumstances that my daughter is in. It just traumatized her. First of all, she suffered the loss of her mother in a car accident. And, she was the primary caregiver at that time. And then my grandmother started looking after Marcella. And I came back, and of course, my grandmother passed away. So my daughter suffered the tragedy of losing two caregivers. And I am now the only caregiver that she knows and she has. I think she is just traumatized. She was living with my grandmother and she saw the cancer taking over, my grandmother. And even now she has difficulty sleeping. And the trauma that she suffered over the months and years, I'm trying to get her some help, and she does need help. And I think the best way I can do it is to do it in Canada.
Well, that's very difficult on a child. Mr. Torres, can you obtain adequate help for your daughter in your home country?
Yeah, you know what? I suppose I could if I had the money. I don't have the money. We have a private health system here. And as I was telling you, I couldn't come back to Canada because I didn't have money, because I used all my savings to try and see if we can keep my grandmother alive. So I have no money. I have no job. And the kind of therapy that I think my daughter needs, I think it's going to cost me thousands of dollars, Canadian dollars. And I just don't have the money. So I've had an opportunity to talk to some Canadian medical professionals, and this sort of treatment for trauma would be covered under the OHIP medical services plan. And I'm hoping to get my daughter treatment in Canada.
And could you tell us, Mr. Torres, why you want to return to Canada?
Well, Canada is my home. I made a conscious decision to come or go to Canada as a professional and to assimilate in the community and contribute to the community. And that's what I did. But for the situation of my grandmother getting sick, I would have built a life and applied for citizenship. That's my aim. I think that, it would be essential for the betterment of my daughter's mental health if we were in Canada. I just wouldn't be able to financially afford the help that she needs. We have a close circle of friends. I have a little bit of money now that I can, get us settled before I find some work. I also have a lot of opportunities in Canada. A lot of people have asked me to work for them, and I'm sifting through my applications that I've made to be able to hopefully find the best suitable job for me. What I do is very much in demand. I'm a cybersecurity officer, and that would be very, helpful for us as a family. I don't think that we'd have any problem, or I'd have any problem finding a job. Marcella's hardly gone to school since 2012 because of the death of her mother, my then wife, and also the death or the illness of my grandmother. So I want to put her in school properly. I want her to get the help that she needs. And I consider Canada my home, and I want to go back to my home as anyone would.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Torres. Are you now employed in Brazil?
No, absolutely not. I'm not employed. I can't find any work here because it's temporary. I thought I was only here for a temporary period of time. I have no, ability to earn a living here. So I've sent out lots of resumes, and unfortunately, we're suffering financially a lot. And I'm trying to save the money that I have from the sale of the condo to start our life up in Canada. So if we were made to continue to live, of course, I'll try and find work, but it wouldn't be the life that I'd want for my daughter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Torres. These are all our questions.
Madam Member, you've had an opportunity to listen to Philip Torres. He always considered Canada as his home. It was never his intention to go back and start resuming life in Brazil. And as you know, Madam Member, the appellant, Mr. Torres, was issued a departure order for non-compliance with his residency obligations, and a removal order was issued under Section 28, subsection 1 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Act. I want to, as we said at the beginning, I want to let you know we're not challenging the legal validity of the removal order. But I am requesting that you grant and allow this appeal on humanitarian and compassionate grounds. We've provided a number of documents for you confirming the situation. We've provided you letters and correspondence that Mr. Torres had with the company that he was working for. I think that, you know, in this particular instance, taking the circumstances into account and the best interests of the child, I think that you should allow this appeal. I say this because I think that Mr. Torres established himself in Canada. He has no job in Brazil. He has no home in Brazil. He was just there to look after his mother. But for the fact that his mother, I meant grandmother. But for the fact that his grandmother was sick, Marcella, his daughter, would have joined him in Canada. Mr. Torres had a very well-paying job, and he was contributing to Canadian society. As you can see in the appellant bundle A1, we've provided you his pay slips. And then we've also provided you the correspondence. One of the pieces of the correspondence that I want you to, if you don't mind, I want to read it into the record for you. And Madam Member, it's page 24 of A1. And it's confirmation of extended leave of absence request. And his immediate boss at that time kept on fighting for him with the HR, saying that, you know, we want you back. You know, it's not easy for me to get these, but, and if I could ask you to look at that page, and I'm going to read it into the record. Hi, Phil. I'm so sorry your grandmother is struggle even more now. Few things in the world are more difficult than seeing your loved ones suffer. I'm happy to inform you you're granted you another 3 months unpaid leave. Yet, I must be frank that it is not easy to convince the HR department about why you should be granted another period of leave. So he's got his employer fighting for him or batting for him. So they need him in Canada, Madam Member. I can go through a number of the other exhibits confirming the situation that the employer did want him to continue the employment, but I'm not going to. You've had an opportunity to go through them before this hearing. So a few things that I want to bring to your attention, particularly the federal court case, and I've given you the citation, but I'll read the citation into the record. We've got a case that we particularly want you to look at. And sorry, give me 1 second, Madam Member. I just want to make sure that I've got the correct citation for you so that you can go find the actual case. As you know, I've got a lot of documentation in my hand here to go through everything. Oh, here it is, madam. So I'd like you to have a look at the case of Nekoi and Canada MCI 2012 FC 363. And I'm going to read into the record the paragraph, and the paragraph starts at paragraph 32, Madam Member. I don't know if you want to follow me with it. The criteria used by the IAD are appropriate for this type of analysis. The court has affirmed the use of analysis by the IAD regarding departure orders issued for the failure to fulfill residency obligations pursuant to Section 28 of the Act. These factors are not exhaustive and can vary depending on the special circumstances of each case. Furthermore, it is at the discretion of the IAD to determine the weight to be accorded to each factor and to each piece of evidence. This court ought not to interfere with those determinations. So, Madam Member, the federal court has given you authority to utilize whatever weight you want to put on the factors we presented before you. And there are a number of factors you have to look at. One of the most important factors, Madam Member, is to look at the best interest of the child. Marcella, the young girl, she was 7 at the time that her mother passed away. And had it not been for the fact that I came back to look after my grandmother, she would have been in Canada. She's had a very disturbed childhood. She's traumatized. And I would suggest best interest of the child would, for you to look at, should be sufficiently compassionate for you to allow the appeal in this case. We've got a number of affidavits in A1. We've got family and friends who are willing to support him. We've provided you bank accounts. We've provided you a copy of his medical health services plan. And when I come across a case like this, I put myself in the position of Mr. Torres. And he says to you, and he's before you today saying, look, I never considered Brazil my home since I left. I've always considered Canada my home. I built a life in Canada. I built a circle of friends in Canada, but for the fact that my siblings could not, in fact, go back and look after my grandmother, I had no choice. I love my grandmother, and I would do it at the drop of a hat. But now I want my daughter and I to go back. I've arranged for psychological help for her in Canada. And I understand it's covered because I've done the investigation, is what Philip says to you. So, Madam Member, I would suggest taking all the circumstances of this particular case that you exercise discretion in the appellant's favor and allow this appeal. Those are my submissions, Madam Member. Unless there's something else that you'd like me to deal with, I would urge you to allow this appeal on humanitarian compassionate grounds. Thank you, Madam.